Let's talk about a different kind of wound. Not one caused by something that happened, but by something that was missing. A wound that's defined by silence. It's a really profound and, honestly, an often overlooked part of our psychology. So let's dive in. We usually think of trauma as some big, specific, terrible event. But what if the most persistent kind of suffering actually comes from an absence, from all the things that didn't happen? The birthday that was forgotten, the cry that went unanswered, the emotional support that just wasn't there. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. When a child makes an emotional sound, cries out or expresses joy and gets nothing back, they don't think, this room is empty. No, they internalize that silence. They conclude something is wrong with them, that their sound, their feeling, wasn't worth echoing in the first place. So this brings us to a really fundamental psychological need. You could almost think of it like the physics of feeling real, and it's all about that echo. See, a child is constantly reaching out, and not always for big things. Sometimes it's just a glance, a hand on their shoulder, or just a subtle shift in a parent's face. All these tiny little interactions are echoes. They're signals that say, I see you, I hear you, you exist. And without that constant feedback, a child's whole sense of reality can feel, kind of shaky. So what do we actually call this trauma of nothing? How do we define a wound that comes from something that's missing? Let's put a name to it and really unpack what it means. This contrast is absolutely key. Classic trauma is an event. You can point to it. There's a clear before and after. But emotional neglect, it's the complete opposite. It's the persistent lack of a response. It's 1,000 invisible things that didn't happen, which, as you can imagine, makes it so incredibly hard to explain and so easy for people to just dismiss. And here's the clinical term for it. Childhood emotional neglect, or CEN for short. It's not about what a parent did, it's about what they failed to do. It's the absence of that crucial emotional connection, that mirroring, that every child needs to thrive. Think about it like this. Children can't really understand their own feelings unless someone helps them learn the language. When a parent or caregiver says something like, wow, you seem really sad right now, they're doing more than just stating in fact. They are literally teaching that child that their internal feelings are real, that they have names, and that they matter enough to be seen by someone else. So what happens when that kid grows up? Well, that lack of an echo in childhood creates a very, very specific kind of adult experience. It very often leads to something called alexithymia. Now, that's a fancy term, but all it really means is being kind of bafflingly unable to identify what you're feeling. I mean, if no one ever taught you the language of your own emotions, how on earth would you be expected to speak it? It's not a character flaw, it's a skill you were never taught. And this is where it gets so confusing, right? Because on the outside, these are often incredibly high-functioning people. They're the reliable one, the successful one, the person everyone assumes is totally fine. But on the inside, there's this persistent feeling of emptiness, of flatness, almost like watching your own life from behind a pane of glass. Clinician Jenny Webb puts it so perfectly. It's not quite depression, not quite anxiety. It's more of a vague sense that something is just off. A feeling like everyone else got a manual for being human, and you're just trying to tune into a frequency you can't quite find. And in relationships, this can be absolutely devastating. A genuine compliment gets brushed off because it just doesn't compute. It doesn't feel real. Consistent, unconditional love. Instead of feeling safe, it can actually feel overwhelming, even suffocating, because your internal blueprint for connection is built on absence, not presence. And look, this isn't just a theory. This is real. A huge review in 2024 looked at 25 separate studies and confirmed it. Adults who went through emotional neglect as kids have significant, measurable struggles with managing their emotions. It's a documented phenomenon. Okay, but here's where we get to a really crucial shift in perspective. What if all these behaviors, what if they aren't flaws? What if at one point they were actually incredibly intelligent solutions? I want you to just let this one sink in for a second. Your coping mechanisms, the ways you learned to get by, they were not mistakes. They were brilliant, adaptive solutions to a totally impossible situation. You learned how to survive in an emotionally empty room. You might have become the quiet one because you figured out that making noise just didn't work. Or maybe you became the funny one because, hey, laughter was the one reliable echo you could count on. You might have become the caretaker or the achiever. All of these are just clever ways to navigate a world where your core emotional needs just weren't on the table. The only problem is, these survival blueprints, they just keep running long after the danger has passed. You're not in that room anymore, but your nervous system is still acting as if you are. It's still flinching at closeness, deflecting kindness, and struggling to even hear its own feelings. So, how do you begin to change that? How do you finally learn to hear your own echo? Let's talk about the path forward. First things first, it's so important to know that healing from this is, well, it's slow. It is not some big, flashy breakthrough moment you see in the movies. It's much quieter than that. It begins with a simple but totally radical decision to take your own inner world seriously, maybe for the very first time. This right here is the core message you have to start telling yourself, over and over. The lack of response was about the room, not about the sound. Your needs were always valid. You were always, always worth showing up for. So what does that actually look like in practice? It's small things. It's just noticing you're angry and just letting that feeling exist for a second without judgment. It's catching yourself when you deflect a compliment and just pausing for a beat to ask, why did I just do that? These are tiny acts of paying attention. And that might sound really insignificant, but if you grew up in a world where no one taught you that your inner experience was even worth paying attention to, then these small acts aren't small at all. Learning to hear yourself, well, that's everything. That's the whole point. Because the sound you make, your feelings, your needs, your truth, it was always, always worthy of an echo. The only thing that was ever missing was the right room. And the question now is, are you ready to start building a new one for yourself?